Well, you know, I think we all have hopes and dreams and plans of what might be when we're kids. And I was no different. When I was a kid, I wanted to become a teacher. And so I did happily become a teacher. I was a kindergarten teacher for many years. And, you know, just like everyone else, we don't just have one dream. We could have more than one dream. And I'd always loved writing. I loved writing little poems. I loved writing little stories, but I never thought that I could really be an author until I turned 64 and I was already a grandmother, and my grown son gave me a very unusual birthday gift. He took me skydiving. Yes, took me skydiving, and it was so much fun and it was really exciting. But the best part, for many reasons, was when my feet touched the ground, I knew that if I could jump out of a perfectly good airplane, I could do anything. And that was a good thing because I had started blogging, and it was like 2011, and I was blogging about picture books because I had loved picture books. And I began connecting with people who were reading picture books, but also people who were writing picture books. And I thought, I think I'd like to do that. And so I started joining Facebook Kidlit groups and critique groups, and I started writing, and then I took classes, and, you know, I did all those steps that you need to do if you want to do something well. And I was very persistent and patient, and voila, it happened.
And here you are.
And
Well,
here
so
I
how did you decide what to write about? I was mentioning that when you've written on different subjects, I know you have one on Passover and accounting book, and I think some of your more recent ones that really focus on historical figures. Like there's Sarah E. Good, who's one of the first African-American women to get a patent. And then there's the wonderful book about the friendship between Marilyn Monroe and Ella Fitzgerald. And how do you go about picking your subjects?
Yeah, so that's a great question. And it's actually a question that every school child asks. I mean, that's really what they want to know. Where do you get your ideas? And for me, it's all about curiosity. If I see something or I hear something that really sparks my curiosity and I want to find out more, and then I start doing research, and then I'm hooked, you know. So with Sarah Good, with Sweet Dream Sarah, I was online. I was looking for the first woman to do whatever, ride a bike, climb a mountain, do whatever. And her name popped up as the first African-American woman to get a US patent in 1885. And I was like, oh my gosh, 1885, that's just 20 years after the end of slavery. That's amazing that she was able to do that. So I began doing research. But the problem was there was nothing about Sarah anywhere except like one line on a website. And I thought, that's not fair. Here we have this woman who had been a slave, and, you know, now she's in Chicago, and life is not easy, and yet she opens a furniture store with her husband. She builds a piece of furniture that's innovative, and she gets a patent. I mean, like, most people never get a patent, right? And here she had so many strikes against her, so many obstacles to overcome. And I said, it's not fair that this woman doesn't have a book about her. And children, no matter what color they are, need to find out about this woman. That's inspiring, that she overcame so much to build a better place. And that's kind of what we all want to try to do. So so that's how I get my ideas. And I mean, the making their voices heard. I was online and I saw a picture of Marilyn Monroe and Ella Fitzgerald.
Mm-hmm.
and it looked like they were friends. You could tell in the picture how, like close they looked. And I was like,
Mm-hmm.
I grew up in the 50s. I didn't know they were friends.
Right.
So I was curious and I started doing the research. So that's pretty much how it happens. I mean, somebody tells me something or I see something, and if it's a person that I feel contributed something wonderful to the world in some way,
Mm-hmm.
or stood up for something really strongly, I feel that's inspiring. And I feel that children need to hear about that person. And so then I write about it.
I just wanted to mention, I know you're probably not able to read the comments as you're speaking, but we have someone else on here who's watching who is also on a writing journey after being a kindergarten teacher. So
Really?
that's
Yeah.
a yes.
Hi.
And speaking about your subjects, I'm really curious about this one. I actually just finished reading it and I loved it. It was so fun. I gave it to my son. I was like, you have to read this because the stories are interesting. They're very kid friendly to read. I mean, there's a lot of information, but it's all told in a really fun way. And you make these connections that I wouldn't have thought about. I don't want to give anything away, but there's a connection between Mary Shelley writing Frankenstein and the invention of the bicycle. But I won't say any more about that.
Yes.
But a lot about or the connection between the Greyhound bus and about the Freedom Riders,
Right.
or about the bicycle and women's suffrage. A lot of connections that I think maybe we wouldn't have thought about. But on the surface, if you tell somebody you're writing a book about transportation, like if you just say that might seem that's very dry, but it isn't. But how did you get interested? Why did you choose transportation as your topic?
Yeah. So I actually didn't, but
Mhm.
again, we go back to where ideas come from, right?
Mhm.
And so I was on the phone with my sister, several years ago, and people who know me and know I love to write,
Mhm.
they're often coming to me with ideas
Oh,
of
right.
people they've heard about,
Mhm.
stories they think would make a good story for kids. So she said, I have a friend who's Swedish, and she is a friend of the granddaughter of this guy named Eric Wickman, who came from Sweden in 1904 when he was only 17 years old, and he had only $60 in his pocket and whatever. And he wound up failing at many jobs, but he finally opened a car dealership. This is 1914 now, so cars are just beginning
Right.
to be used, like the Model T. And he opened the dealership in Hibbing, Minnesota, where it's very cold and
Right.
snowy a lot. And it was a mining town. Anyway, so he had this dealership for a year and nobody bought the car because they had no money.
Mhm.
So he was very inventive. He bought the car and he began offering rides to the miners to go from their town to the mine. It was 2 miles, and he charged them 15 cents each way. And it was very popular, so popular that he had to buy another car because he was earning the money and hire more drivers. And then he had to build a bigger vehicle, like a bus,
Right.
and that became the Greyhound Bus Company. So, like, that's inspiring that this young man came with nothing, couldn't even speak English, and yet he founded a company that is, nationwide. It's still around,
Mhm.
and there are Greyhound buses in Canada and in Mexico. So, I mean, I think that's a story that children would enjoy hearing. And
Right.
I try to make the stories fun. You
Yeah.
know, they're filled with like fun and
Mhm.
and interesting, and it's not just dry facts.
Right.
And that book, particularly, there are many sidebars, like at the
Yeah.
bottom or on the side of the page, and it gives you more detailed information about the invention or whatever, but it doesn't like muddy up the
Right.
story.
Yes. Doesn't get in the way of the story. Right.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So it's a fun narrative that kids
Mm-hmm.
can enjoy and learn and be inspired. And then if they want more information, they can, delve into it more deeply. So
Right.
yeah.
I
So
love
that's
that.
how
I
that's
think it makes it appeal to like a wider audience of kids. Like I could imagine my younger son, he might just be interested in this story because it's a fun story. My older son, he would probably will go back and read the detailed information because he wants to know more. So I love the way you did that. Mm-hmm.
right. And there's a lot of STEM, and we only started out with the one bus story, but we
Mm-hmm.
sent it to
Mm.
things that move.
Mm-hmm.
And so we included the folding wheelchair. We
Right.
included robotics. I mean, so just more than, cars and trains
Right. Things that you wouldn't
and
normally think of as things that move, like the
right,
robotics is one that I wouldn't have thought to include with that, but it
right,
makes
right.
sense.
Yeah. So it makes it a
And
real fun book.
and I love too that you include people like Ray, I don't know, I'm not going to say her name right, Ray Montag,
Ray
the
Montague, right? Ray
yeah,
Montague.
Montague, thank you, the computer
Yes.
generated chip design, which leads me to my next question because as I mentioned, you've been a longtime supporter of Multicultural Children's Book Day. A lot of the subjects that you write about are diverse, and that's something that's always been really important to you. I know, and you were recently on a panel for the Fay B. Kegler Book Festival on
Mm-hmm.
normalizing diversity and decentering the dominant culture using picture books for anti-racist teaching. So first, why has this always been something important to you, and what is the role that picture books can play in anti-racist teaching?
Right. I was very lucky. I grew up in, we're different. They were all races, all religions, all belief systems, and we all, we were all friends. But I was luckier than many of them because even though my parents didn't have much money, I was white. And I think a lot of people who are white don't realize, when they talk about white privilege, I never understood it really. I always thought, oh, well, I wasn't privileged. I only had one pair of shoes. I only had one doll. I mean, my parents didn't have money, but that's not the privilege. The
Mm-hmm.
privilege is just being white. And so when you go into a store, the detectives aren't following you because they think maybe you'll be stealing. So that's the
Right.
whole thing about, white privilege. And so I realized early on that my hopes and dreams and plans of what might be, they came about because I looked around me and my teachers were white and, the police officers were white and the store owners were white. I mean, most of the people were white who were in roles of leadership.
Mm-hmm.
And when children read books, and the books were all white, pretty much.
Right.
And when children read books, they are getting their sense of self from those books. And if they don't see themselves in those books, or they only see themselves in those books in menial roles or, bad roles, that's going to be the picture they get
Right.
of who they are. So I think for that reason, I know for that reason, it's so important for us to make sure that there's diversity in books, and not only diversity like this is one of my favorite books, Lizzie Demands a Seat. So
Mm-hmm.
it's about fighting for your rights. So
Mm-hmm.
that's an important story for
Right.
sure. But we also have to have books where there's diversity, where it's just a story,
Right.
about a child
Yes.
or a little girl who goes to school.
Right.
And what I love about books like this one in particular is that not only are the children diverse, but the teacher is also diverse.
Right.
And that's what children need to see, because
Mm-hmm.
when they see themselves in a book, in a picture book, and they're young, and they see themselves in roles of leadership, that empowers them
Mm-hmm.
to believe that they have a right to have hopes and dreams and plans of what might be. And that it empowers them, it gives them agency, it lets them realize that they are of value, that their voice being heard, that they're being
Mm-hmm.
seen. And if they don't see that, they don't know that. I mean, no matter, we can tell them, we can tell them, you're great, you're wonderful. But if they don't see it, seeing is believing, right? So,
Right.
I think we need to make sure, we need to encourage booksellers and publishers to be that, and we need to be lifting up, making sure that
Mm-hmm.
marketers are getting opportunities to write. And that's why I love, Multicultural Children's Book Day, because that's what you guys are doing. You're
Mm-hmm.
really lifting up those diverse books and trying to get them into the hands of kids.
Right.
Teachers, librarians, booksellers, publishers, they are the gatekeepers.
Mm-hmm.
So we need to get them that this is what we need, and this is what children need.
Yeah, I was just thinking about that, that I'm sure your perspective was also influenced by being a teacher for so many years and seeing what
Yeah,
effect
right.
the book that you shared with the kids, what effect that had on your students.
Oh, definitely. And as I say, I was teaching in New York City, so I had a very diverse classroom. I was very lucky. I had a paraprofessional. That's what they called them at the time. I don't know what they call them now, and she was bilingual, and so she was very helpful, and it was great. It was a good team. So yeah, I think books are the window. They're windows. There's a very famous quote. It's
Right.
picture books are the mirrors, the windows, and the sliding glass doors. And so they're the mirrors, because child looks and sees himself or herself. They're the windows, because even if it's a different culture, now you're learning about it. So you're looking out that window. And it's the sliding glass door that allows children to step out and reach their potential, step out into the world empowered. So yay for picture books.
Yes.
I love them.
Beautifully said. And just to wrap up, speaking of picture books, can you tell us about your next project? I understand that's going to be on Annie Londonderry, who was the first woman to bike around the world.
Yes, yes, it is. And it's called Pedal, Balance, Steer. How Annie Londonderry, first woman to cycle around the world. And what's amazing about her is she was a 24-year-old immigrant, a young mother with 3 young children, and she heard about a wager to ride, for the first woman to ride a bike around the world, because a few years before, a man had done it. And in those days, 1890s, they thought women were weak and stupid and, couldn't own anything, couldn't vote. I mean, women had very little power in those days. So this woman who had never ridden a bike before said,
That's amazing.
I'm going to do it. And she took 2 lessons and she did it. So I told the story because I thought, you know what? And she inspired many women to
Mm-hmm.
say, hey, wait a minute, if she can do. So that's the thing. When, when you have the first person who does something, it
Mm-hmm.
may be really difficult for them, but they are the trailblazer. They are the groundbreaker, the pioneer that opens the path, and
Right.
then others follow. So,
I love
yep,
it. And just to go
really.
back for people, so we'll watch for that. But if you haven't read some of our other books, because that reminds me of so many of the stories that are in this book, From Here to There, it just made me think about the wife of, was it Carl Benz, that he had
Oh,
invented
yes.
a car and he didn't want to drive it anywhere because he was so nervous. And she said, okay, I'm just going to do it. And she snuck out,
Right.
didn't
He was
even tell,
afraid to take it out.
drove it around. And once everybody saw
Right.
it, then they said, oh, okay, I guess
Right.
this is safe to do. Well, anyway, I
Well,
will
they
go ahead and
said if
wrap
a
up.
woman can do it,
That I guess anybody can, right?
yeah,
Yes, and
right,
sorry, you just
exactly.
have a comment about how many women never learn new things like swimming. Yes, it's really inspiring to read these stories about women who are doing new things. And
Yeah.
thank you so much for all that you're doing and inspiring new authors. We didn't even get a chance to talk about that, but if you haven't looked at it, look, the 50 Precious Words Challenge and the 50 Precious Words for Kids.